Thank you, everyone, for joining us for a very special edition of Chair Chat. I'm Chair Ken Mejia-Beal, and tonight we are honored to have Senator Tammy Duckworth joining us this evening. How are you doing this evening, Senator?
I'm doing great. I'm here at the Capitol running back and forth between votes in the middle of a 7 vote series. So we'll probably go into 10 o'clock tonight, probably.
Well,
We're
we
getting
do
people confirmed, so that's critical.
well, we do not want to keep you waiting. So if it's okay, I just want to jump in. Um,
Yeah.
my first question for you is what accomplishment are you the most proud of during your time in the Senate?
Wow. I passed a lot of legislation. So I think the legislation that I've been managed to pass that have made everyday people's lives better, especially for those with disabilities. My Wheelchair Reporting Rule Act, which now requires airlines to report when they break somebody's wheelchair. They didn't used to have to. It's really important. I just passed the Drinking Water and Wastewater Act, which is then with 89 votes on the floor at a time when it's so partisan. I actually got 89 votes on the floor, and that was put into the bipartisan infrastructure plan. I'm very proud of that. So that's going to help us work towards replacing all the lead lines, water lines in the entire country, and fix all of the sewer systems. And
Wow.
in DuPage County, there are a lot of towns that every time there's a major rain or come spring, which is not too far around, you see flooding. There's now money that's going to come to local communities, to municipalities to fix those problems.
Well, I think I speak on behalf of all of DuPage when we say we appreciate that. Something you touched on, the Build Back Better bill. What are some of the ways that President Biden and Democrats have delivered for working families and helped our economic recovery from the pandemic?
Well, we started off with the CARES Act and then the American Rescue Plan, which if your kids went back to school, and went back to in-person learning and were able to do that, that's because of the American Rescue Plan, which, by the way, not a single Republican voted for. That sent money into your local and municipal governments. And that is really critical. So if your local government has finally started, putting money in fixing your schools, has finally started doing some of that sidewalk repair work, all of that, if your schools reopened during the pandemic, that's because of the American Rescue Plan. And that was really critical that we got that money out to help folks. During the American Rescue Plan, we also put money into the bank accounts of parents with the tax credit for the child tax credit. Unfortunately, it expired in December at the end of the year, and Republicans are refusing to let us renew it. So we're going to keep working on it to try to bring it back, but that really helped. That lifted 40% of the kids who are in poverty, lifted 40% of those kids out of poverty. Really, really critical for the well-being of families all across the country. And then with as you mentioned, the Build Back Better, the bipartisan infrastructure deal, there's money in that to fix roads and bridges and sewer systems. I never thought I'd be so excited about fixing sewers, but I've become the sewer expert. I'm now the chair of the water, fisheries, wildlife, and water. And the water part of that is it's the Great Lakes and all that, but it's also, excuse me, it's really drinking water and wastewater. And I'm very proud of the work that we were able to do there. So as you go through this year and you see projects being fixed and broadband coming into local communities, it's because of the work the Democrats did with very little or no help from Republicans.
Well, thank you. We will remember that when we're knocking doors. You've kind of touched on it a little bit, but how is the bipartisan infrastructure deal already helping Illinoisans, especially those of us in DuPage?
Well, the money that is flowing from that deal that's going to help us fix our infrastructure is going to be really critical. And for those of us who live in DuPage, and DuPage is my old congressional district, and all of us who commute know that there's a lot of money in there for transit for people who commute. So it's going to do several things. There's a piece of it that has to do with congestion, which I wrote, which is to reduce congestion on our roadways. But there's a whole other piece that has to do with making investments in our commuter rail, the Metra system. I used to commute, believe it or not, before I moved out into suburbs. I lived in DeKalb and commuted to Evanston.
Wow.
It took two Metra trains, a long drive, two Metra trains to get there. So I get what the Metra is like. And so what we're going to do is going to really fix the commuter rail system so that those of us who are, commuting on the trains to get into Chicago or doing the reverse commute can actually have faster, more reliable access. In as part of the plan, the bipartisan infrastructure plan is my ASAP Act, which is money that we set aside at 1.75 billion a year over 5 years that is going to make all of our transit stations fully accessible, so that you're never going to have a bus stop or a rail stop or a metro or an L or anything like that that is not fully accessible. And I'm very proud of that portion of it as well. So for me, one of the things that really frustrated me about living where we do and out in the suburbs is congestion, congestion, congestion. It's bad for our family life, right? If you spend your time out in traffic jams, you're not with your family. You're stuck trying to get to work, trying to get home. It's
Right.
bad for the environment with greenhouse gases. And it's bad for development because companies don't want to come out and create new jobs in a place where people are frustrated because the roadways are so bad. So that's one portion of the bipartisan infrastructure deal that you're really going to see a big difference. Another, I was just out at a Corps of Engineers site, is major improvements in our locks and dams. And you're like, why is that important? Well, it's going to stop the invasive Asian carps from getting into the Great Lakes. So we're going to stop the Asian carps at the Brandon Road project, which is going to keep that invasive species from getting all the way up the Illinois River and into the Great Lakes. And that's significant for us in the suburbs as well, because it's going to keep the Asian carp from getting into all of the waterways. And people don't realize how many little creeks and rivers there are throughout DuPage County, but it's significant. And there's a lot of, outdoor recreational value to it as well. So we're going to stop the Asian carp from getting into those waterways.
Well, thank you for all of that, especially the Metro. So
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about another bill that you worked on. President Biden signed your bipartisan Protecting Moms Who Served Act into law. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because that's a huge deal and something I'm sure you're incredibly proud of.
It is. Thank you. It's something that I worked. It's part of the Momnibus. We like to come up with catchy slogans, but the Momnibus is a series of bills that I'm working with members of both the House and the Senate. So Lauren Underwood, Congresswoman Underwood, is my partner in the House in this, and she led the House effort. So it's a whole series of different pieces of legislation that have to do with maternal mortality rate in communities of color, especially among Black mothers and Asian and Latina mothers, in particular, with the high maternal mortality rate. In fact, we're the only country in the developed world where maternal mortality is actually increasing. It's increasing. That is wrong. And so this bill has to do with women who served in the military. And it has to do with making sure that DOD and VA are coordinated with a civilian healthcare system to provide extensive healthcare support to moms who serve, women veterans, to include things like prenatal care, birthing classes, lactation support, breast pumps, and all of that, and to make sure that our military women who become, our military veterans who become mothers, who give birth, are actually fully supported in that process. And that it also commissions a GAO report to look at the health of female veterans across the board in terms of maternal health, because we know that we're seeing a lot of issues with maternal health and everything from postpartum complications to, as I said, nursing support and other comorbidities with giving birth.
Well, I spoke with Congresswoman Underwood, and I'll share the same thing with you. As someone who lost a best friend 12 hours after she gave childbirth, I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing on this and shedding light to something that has been I'd like to say, an open secret, and especially the Black and Brown communities for a long time. So thank
Yes.
you. And I have one more question for you, and then we can keep our democracy rolling. Um, how can we continue to make progress for working families? And why is it so important to get voters out so that they understand what we're trying to do for working families? It's kind of a two-part.
Well, I think that what the work that you do in supporting folks who become active, especially in DuPage County, is making sure that we support people, whether they want to run for office themselves or whether you just want to, join the effort and everything from getting people registered to vote to making sure that you go out and you work on a campaign somewhere. That is really critically important. I was in a part of the state not too long ago that is a very red district, and I was talking to a union, and the union leader is like, "Hey, Tammy, this is a very red county. It's hard for us to talk to our union members to get them to vote for Democrats because they don't like Joe Biden. They think they think he's old and he's not doing a good job." And what I said to them was, "Listen, it's not yes, it's about Joe Biden being president, but it's also about what happens when Democrats get the majority. When Democrats get the majority, you need to vote for Joe Biden. You need to vote for Governor Pritzker. You need to vote for me. You need to vote, for everybody up and down the ticket, Democrats, because when Democrats are in charge, people's lives get better. When Democrats are in charge, we pass the child tax credit. When when Democrats are in charge, Tammy Duckworth gets to gavel and gets to be chair of the water committee. And that's how we got the money into the bipartisan infrastructure deal to fix lead and get lead out of our drinking water supply. For those union members, when Democrats are in charge, who gets to be the head of the Secretary of Labor, a former union guy? Who gets to be somebody who's in charge of education, somebody who actually worked as a teacher, as opposed to a billionaire heiress who and Betsy DeVos, whose sole job was to destroy the Department of Education and privatize schooling. So what you need to do, what everyone needs to do is get out there, mobilize people and explain to them that your lives are better when Democrats have the majority, when Democrats represent you, because we care about families. We care about working people. We care about everyday Americans as opposed to the billionaires that Republicans care about. And so what you can do is just get out there and talk to folks. And DuPage is not a given. People start to talk about DuPage like it's some blue county. It's like, are you kidding me? I was there when it was red. I lost a race trying to represent DuPage in 2006. That's not that long ago. So we can't take anything for granted, and especially this year, we really do have to get people to turn out to vote. It's going to be so critical. We can't lose the House, and we certainly can't lose the Senate.
I agree 100%. And once again, I want to thank you so much for taking time out tonight. I know it's a busy night. And as soon as we can get you into DuPage, Senator Duckworth, there is a special vet I know out there. Her name is Margie Wolf. Can't wait to introduce you to, but I can't wait to get you out to DuPage County so that we can chat and really talk about the work. So thank you so much. Have a great evening, and thank you for all that you do. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone. If you want to see what I'm doing, just turn on C-SPAN 3 or see me on the floor voting. I'll see everybody out there. I was just home over the weekend, so I'm sorry I missed seeing some of your folks back home, but we'll see each other again soon.
Very soon. Thank you so much, Senator Duckworth. Have
Thank
a great
you.
evening.
Take care. You too.
And thank you all for joining us. Have a wonderful evening.